All right. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. Hello and welcome to the Federal Highway Administration webinar, Disability Advisory Groups Involvement in Local Public Agency Transition Plan Implementation. This is the fourth and final webinar in this series, Transitioning to a More Accessible Tomorrow. My name is Brad Allen. I'm a consultant with Applied Pavement Technology, or AppTech, and we are very proud to be supporting this FHWA very important effort. For this webinar, participants will be on mute. If you would like to ask questions to one of our speakers or raise a concern regarding any issues with the webinar, please use the chat box to inform a host. You can access the chat function in the Zoom menu at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can by the end of the webinar. Closed captioning is being provided for this webinar. If you wish to view the closed captioning, please expand the CC button on the ribbon at the bottom of your Zoom window and select Show Subtitles. You can also view a complete transcript in a separate window by choosing View Full Transcript from the same menu. An ASL interpreter is also being provided for this webinar. If you have questions about the functionality of the Zoom meeting platform, please visit the site shown on the screen. Please note the written disclaimer that is on the screen and being placed in the chat box. To summarize, by attending or speaking in today's virtual workshop on disability advisory groups involvement in local public agency transportation plan implementation, you consent to be audio recorded by FHWA and its agents. Further, by attending or speaking in the virtual workshop, you also authorize FHWA to use for educational, promotional, or any other purposes recordings of or by you by FHWA without further notice or consent. By attending or speaking in the virtual workshop, you release FHWA and its agents from any liability arising out of the use of any such recordings. Please review the full written disclaimer, which again is being placed in the chat box. As I mentioned, today is the fourth and final webinar in this series. It is being recorded as the prior three webinars have been, and they will all be made available by FHWA at a later date. Please watch the FHWA YouTube channel for these videos to arrive. And with that, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Todd Webb of FHWA's Office of Civil Rights. Todd?
Thank you, Brad. All right, today's agenda, we're going to have introductions. Today, we're going to hear from disability advisory groups involvement in LPA transition plan implementation. We're going to hear from the Council for Community Accessibility, CCA, and those members are Barbara Salisbury and Michael Shermis. Welcome to the FHWA Virtual Peer Exchange on ADA Transition Plan Implementation for Local Public Agencies. My name is Todd Webb, ADA Program Analyst from the FHW Office of Civil Rights. I will be facilitating today's session. This is our fourth webinar in a series of 4. This session will highlight the importance of the role of disability advisory groups, which include individuals with disabilities, as well as government representatives, community members, and disability advocates. These groups focus on issues of importance to people with disabilities in the development and implementation of ADA transition plans. Today, you will hear from Michael Shermis from the City of Bloomington, Indiana, and Barbara Salisbury from the American Council of the Blind of Indiana and Chair of the Transportation and Mobility Committee of Bloomington Community Council for Accessibility. Before we begin, we're going to go ahead and launch our first poll question. All right, so our first poll question, what type of agency do you represent? We'll go ahead and give you about a minute to answer this. All right. So it looks like the majority of individuals here represent local or county government, followed by state DOT and then MPOs. Thank you. Today you will hear from Michael Shermis from the City of Bloomington, Indiana, and Barbara Salisbury from the American Council of Blind of Indiana and the chair of the Transportation Mobility Committee of Bloomington Community Council for Accessibility. Michael Shermis is a special projects coordinator at the City of Bloomington Community and Family Resources Department, where he works with the Council for Community Accessibility, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday Celebration Commission, the Monroe Domestic Violence Coalition, and the Nonprofit Alliance. He is a nonprofit consultant with a wide variety of organizations in the social services, arts, health, and environmental areas. Previously, he was the Vice President of Client Services for Wisdom Tools, where he specialized in maximizing human capital for Fortune 500 clients, government entities, and nonprofit organizations. Michael has served on several nonprofit boards, including United Way and the Lotus Educational and Arts Foundation. He has a BA from Purdue University in Philosophy and Sociology and an MA from Indiana University in Religious Studies. Barbara Salisbury is the chair of the Transportation and the Mobility Committee of the Bloomington Community Council for Accessibility, the city's advisory committee on disability-related issues. She also serves as the president of the American Council of the Blind of Indiana. Barbara has been a transportation advocate for over 20 years, serving on many councils and committees in various roles. She established the Monroe County Coalition for Access and Mobility in 2011 through an Accessibility Transportation Coalition Initiative grant award. This coalition held educational events to inform the disability community and the transportation planning entities about transportation and mobility issues. The coalition became the Community Council for Accessibility in 2018, where it remains today with the same goals and objectives of educating and advocating for better transportation and mobility for the disability community. Barbara holds an undergraduate degree in music therapy and is a graduate of the Virginia Partners in Policy Making Project. Please welcome Michael Shermis and Barbara Salisbury.
Hi, my name is Michael Shermis. Good to meet you all.
And this is Barbara Salisbury, and I am participating from this end with someone else who is my guide dog, Alaska, sitting here at my feet.
And I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully that's okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Today we're going to talk about a unique relationship that our city, the city of Bloomington, has forged with the community of people with disabilities and their advocates. Before we start with that, though, we'll do the formal part and tell you about our city's transition plan. Slide here. Or not. Oh, there we went. Okay. So the good news is that we have a transition plan. The bad news is that it hasn't been updated in a while. It does the standard things that transition plans do, including evaluation of physical facilities and buildings and parking lots and parks and park facilities and public rights of way. It prioritizes sidewalk segments for improvement. It determines funding sources. It creates a schedule for accessibility improvement. Also, it has success stories and grievance procedures and sidewalk and curb ramp evaluation criteria. It probably wouldn't take all that much to really update it. And being asked to talk about it formally like this will serve as the impetus for doing just that. Well, that, and of course, I'm taking a transition plans course at the National ADA Symposium in a couple of weeks. That'll help too. But what it doesn't really talk about are all the other things we do to build a strong relationship with the community in terms of issues the people in the disability community care about. It's not like we don't follow the plan. It's just that we've found there is so much more to what you can do than focus on how many sidewalks you fix. That's gonna get done. And of course, like probably every city in the United States, not at the pace we like. But we are out there changing hearts and minds and making our community aware of people with disabilities and the issues they face. And that's what we'd like to talk to you more about today. So first, let me give you some context. So the Council for Community Accessibility started in 1990, 6 months before the passage of the ADA, in an attempt by our city to get out in front, knowing that it was coming. It's a volunteer group that advocates for the interests of people with disabilities, made up of members who come from diverse backgrounds, share a personal interest in accessibility issues, and bring a wide range of leadership experiences. Our vision is an inclusive community where everyone is valued and empowered to access equitable opportunities. And it is made up by people of lots of different disabilities, of course, and a lot of advocates as well. Currently, we are structured into 3 committees: accessibility, activities and events, and transportation and mobility. And most of the work that we actually do takes place inside these committees, all of which have amazing and excellent volunteers. Let me tell you briefly about what 2 of the committees do, and Barbara will tell you much more about the other. The Accessibility Committee primarily runs the accessibility survey program. Volunteer surveyors assess primarily businesses, and for those that are accessible, give them a decal, which you can see in the image that's on the screen. There is a decal that we has an adhesive, and we put it on windows. We take photos of people actually putting it on the window and put that in our newsletter and on our Facebook page. This is a picture of a giant poster that has the businesses' names all over it, and we bring that frequently to our events too. The survey that we do includes checking on standard areas of parking, path of travel, entrance and doors, elevators, stairs and railings, common areas, and public restrooms. We do that all to see, whether these businesses are accessible. We never say they're ADA compliant. We say that they're accessible and that they followed the major things that businesses ought to do to allow people with disabilities to access their business. Over the years, we have done several hundred surveys with lots of volunteer surveyors. You can find our accessibility decal on well over 150 businesses around town right now. We have also done our community schools. And for the first time last year, we did all of our polling sites, which was quite the experience. Our next big challenge is that we're also working on a digital accessibility survey to review websites and make them more accessible in 10 areas, like the use of screen readers, color contrast, alt tags, etc., that kind of stuff. This was actually sparked by Barbara, who can tell you more about that.
Yeah, this came to our attention because the American Council of the Blind of Indiana was preparing to hold its annual state convention, which we do in collaboration with the American Council of the Blind of Ohio. So it's a joint convention. And we were holding it in Bloomington that particular year. And so we were interested in, okay, what about restaurants? Will people be able to know what's on the menu? So we started talking about, do we need Braille? Really the best option, honestly, is to make sure that your website, your menus are accessible. So we started looking at all the different restaurants in the downtown area where the convention was going to be held, and found that this might be an issue. So that sort of launched this this focus on information access through websites, and are the businesses not only physically accessible, their buildings, their pathway to enter the building, etc., but is their website. So this is how this got started, and this part of the accessibility emphasis. So.
And we are in the final throes of trying to finalize this digital accessibility survey. The really good thing is we live in a college town, and we have a Department of Informatics, and we have lots of eager students who are very eager to put on their resume that they helped develop this and helped survey businesses, because they know that they're going to be asked by any business that hires them, oh, so you're the young person, you can help us figure out how to make our website more accessible. So hopefully we'll be finishing that up real soon. We also have 3 annual community awareness events. These are a big deal for our organization, because making people aware that of people with disabilities is a key part of what we do. We have the ADA anniversary celebration every year, coming up very soon. We also have one called Breaking Down the Barriers, where we roll out and thank businesses for being accessible, give them kudos. Have a lot of people with wheelchairs come into their business and say thank you. Sometimes we give them flowers or balloons or candy and say, thanks a lot for being accessible. We appreciate it. And people with disabilities have power in the community, and you want to make your place accessible for them. And then gather around the table in an evening of connections with community leaders. So let me tell you a little bit about each of these and how they've evolved over the years. So there are, this is the first one I'm going to talk about, is the ADA anniversary celebration. It started out a few years ago with a grant from Indiana Humanities. But we like doing it so much that we kept doing it every year. And it frequently has 6 to 8 agencies who assist people with disabilities by offering kind of challenge activities and giveaways and things like that. We are going to be doing it again this year. Matter of fact, this upcoming weekend, or not the next weekend, I mean. Last year, due to the pandemic, we had to go virtual by having organizations present from remote locations and allow people to enter breakout rooms to do the activities. It was quite the technical challenge, and clearly not great for hands-on activities, since they couldn't actually do it. Here, in this next slide is several pictures that show some of the games that we were doing. You can see we have what we call a photo booth, where people hold up a frame and are inside the frame. There's a spinning wheel activity in one of the images where people are spinning the wheel and they get asked a question and get a prize. And then one of the images is of a wheelchair obstacle course that our local county public library builds out every year, and kids and parents get the opportunity to try to get through it and see how difficult it is to navigate. So when we went digital last year, we tried to engage as best as we could, but you can see from the photos that it's more fun because it's really hands-on, and most of these photos, by the way, have blurred faces to protect their identities. So this year we're back to being live, and we can't wait because it's a good opportunity to connect with a lot of people in the community. Then next one is breaking down the barriers. We usually do this in the spring. Like I said, we thank businesses for their efforts in becoming continue to be accessible. There's showing power. The people with disabilities have buying power. We do it for media exposure, obviously. And it brings new community members to our organization, the CCA, Council for Community Accessibility, and show that we are an action-focused group of people. And frankly, we do it to have fun, and it is a lot of fun. So this last year, and no, I'll need just to actually go to the slides here, and you can see the photos. As you can see, again, we use another kind of photo booth concept in the first picture, where we're showing many of the people that showed up. And one of the other pictures is a person at the business putting on the decal. We are in wheelchairs and with canes, and like I said, we all talk and connect with all these business owners, and it is a lot of fun. But this past year, again, we couldn't go out into the community and do this, obviously. So we decided to switch it up and talk about breaking down the barriers for all the virtual events, because of course everybody was having a lot of virtual events and a lot of programming, and much of that programming is not near as accessible as you would wish it to be. So we had people who were deaf, blind, had traumatic brain injuries, and others talk to us very specifically about ways to make the virtual events and websites accessible to everyone. It was a highly interactive event with a clever use of breakout rooms to get everyone to talk about what they were going to do differently to make their virtual events more accessible. And we came back together and had great discussions on what people were going to do, and questions for people who had the specific disabilities that we covered, and allowed them to talk about, well, this is something that would matter to me. And everybody, including us as the people who put on the event, learned how to make their events more accessible. So that was a really great opportunity. So, and then finally, we do one called Gather Around the Table, an evening of connections with community leaders. We provide key industry and community leaders the opportunity to inform us of what they're doing in the areas of accessibility. So we invite people from, the hospital, the school system, large businesses in town, justice system, all sorts of different places, and say, what are you doing to make your areas more accessible? And they tell us. And we stick everybody with disabilities all around the room at the tables, and they stay in one area, and then all the people who were the community leaders moved around. And it's a way to for them to access us, the Council for Community Accessibility members and advocates, and to hear what issues are of concern to them. And at the same time, the opportunity for our members to share their experiences as well. And I'll once again show you some photos here. We really like this photo booth concept, as you can tell, trying to get people into frames, and that's what all of these are. The one in the lower left of this screen is actually a picture of Barbara and myself too. So we are going to have this coming up in a couple months, and we are mixing it up again because once again we got another grant from Indiana Humanities, and we are using a book called About Us. It's a disability series from the New York Times. We will be reading and discussing that book and some of the essays in it. And we're having the co-editor come and talk a little bit about it. And then we're going to have people who have disabilities actually read a favorite section of the book and a short, brief section. But we're asking them to read it by rewriting the portion that they're going to speak by making it more accessible and easier for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to understand. So it's going to be kind of a launch for a project to look at translating this book in an effort to make it more accessible for everybody. So it's kind of interesting that a book on accessibility is not as accessible as you wish, but that's frequently the case for a lot of books. And so we're going to try to work through that. So, so that's those events. I'm going to turn it over to Barbara and let her speak more about the Transportation and Mobility Committee and the events that we hold on in that area. So, Barbara?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I want to emphasize here that I'm speaking to you from the perspective of an advocate, and most of what I do is volunteer. And so I want to tell you a short story about how the Transportation and Mobility Committee came to be. And you will see a running thread here, I hope, that building partnerships and working to maintain those partnerships is critical and key to change in your community. So the Transportation and Mobility Committee actually began with a relationship between myself and someone at the Metropolitan Planning Organization. I had started attending the meetings over 10 years ago with my family's move back to Bloomington, Indiana. And I had gotten involved and had started some communications with the MPO about their documents and the prevalence of the accessibility, terms of accessibility in the documents. And unfortunately, by doing a search, we didn't find the word accessibility or accessible a lot. So that became of interest to me. And so I was in communication, had started building a relationship in particular with one of the staff people in the MPO. And all of a sudden, we became aware of an opportunity for a grant. And the grant was it was called Accessible Transportation Coalition's Initiative Grant. And of course, as these things often are, very quick turnaround. We had 3 weeks to pull together the critical entities that were needed to apply for this grant. And if we had not started building relationships already, that wouldn't have happened. And then we had to write the grant. So, but the relationships were started. They were foundational already. And so we were able to pull together the critical people for that grant, which were, we had to have someone from the MPO. We had to have a community advocate. So we had that person, which was me. And then we had to have the transit company, and relationships were already starting there as well. So we pulled together those entities, wrote the grant, and were awarded. And so we held our event, and which was to really begin focusing on what would your coalition look like, and what would be your emphasis. And so out of that came the Monroe County Coalition for Access and Mobility. A big, long name. Wasn't my choice, but that's okay. So it was a long name. And so the group named it Monroe County Coalition for Access and Mobility. And so we started out with one of our goals is to really look at accessibility and making sure that the language in our documents were present. Also looking at surveying what exists in the community. Where are the needs in the community? So we started at that point and started doing some work, different projects in this with this focus. And in the meantime, we got involved with the Human Services Coordination Plan and made sure that some key components of that plan addressed, for example, mobility management and also volunteer driver program. There were those were two things that were very important to us, and we became involved in making sure that those were identified in the Human Services Coordination Plan with the MPO. And voila, a few months later, another grant comes to our attention. And this one was to apply for monies for a mobility management position. And so we, the coalition, or its partners, got together and wrote this grant. We had already in our coalition the transit company, the area agency on aging, and of course other advocates, transit advocates. And so we wrote this grant using the transit company as our, where the grant would come, they would be the physical agent, and partnering with the area agency on aging to facilitate the and work with the person who would fill the position. So at that point, I became interested. I knew that I would want to apply for the position. And so I stepped away from the writing of the grant. And we, in the end, we got the grant. And so the mobility management position came to fruition. And its focus was to construct from the ground up a voucher program, and also to research the viability of the volunteer driver program for our area. So that was in place for about 3 years. In the meantime, the coalition did a lot of different projects and have done up until a couple years ago, did informational programming for the community, held forums with city planners and policymakers and elected officials to inform and collect input from people who are interested in transportation and mobility. So we did a variety of projects. And the mobility management position was key in some of these projects. So we existed as a coalition for about 8 years. And now we will move on to the next slide, which is slide 14. It really became apparent to us that we thought we would get more visibility in becoming a part of the Community Council for Accessibility, which is a part of the City of Bloomington. It is a mayor's advisory committee on all things disability and accessibility. So we'd already started building a relationship with Michael Shermas. He was very involved in our coalition. So we already had a foot in the door through a liaison with the council. So in 2018, we became a committee of the Community Council for Accessibility. And immediately we held another major event in 2018, after only becoming a part of the committee 5 months prior. We applied for an ADA Indiana grant and were awarded. Again, this grant was pulled together within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, but the partners were already in place. And so we were awarded the ADA Indiana grant, and we held our event of 2018. And I believe that might be the next slide, but I wanted to emphasize that one of the reasons becoming a part of the council, it gave us more visibility, but it also gave us staff support and gave us hands-on for writing grants and planning events, etc., which was very critical because, as you might guess, and as I'm sure you know, it's time consuming to do these things. So in 2018, we did apply for the ADA grant, and Michael, we can move now to slide 15 if you haven't already. We applied for the ADA grant, were awarded, and held our first event as a Transportation and Mobility Committee of the Community Council for Accessibility. Our focus was to look at transportation and ride hailing and how those services like transit and ride hailing services can work together to expand options for people with disabilities. So we held a two-part event. We had a luncheon for planners and policymakers, elected officials, and key advocates. And so the luncheon was by invitation, and we had a speaker, a nationally known speaker that we invited to talk about micromanagement, transit, microtransit, how transit and these ride-hailing services can work together to expand transportation, etc. So that was very successful. But the other part of our event, we held a workshop, a hands-on workshop for people with disabilities, of all types of disabilities, and we had a speaker from Uber and another speaker with disabilities to speak with us regarding how this app and how this service can be used hands-on for people with disabilities. Again, that was a workshop setting. We had some money left over from our grant, and so we launched a one-on-one training using students and other volunteers to go and work with a person with an iPhone or some kind of smartphone app to learn how to use it for to expand their transportation services through Uber. We had gift cards from Uber. We worked with Uber, and also the ride-hailing training module was actually written by one of our committee members. So that was very successful. It was really a pilot project, and we have actually been contacted by other communities regarding that module. Also in 2019, actually I misspoke. I think that event was 2019, so I'm a little off. So that event was 2019. In 2020, we weren't able to hold a major event, but in 2021, we just held another event. Again, we got an ADA Indiana grant to hold this event. This time our focus was more on pedestrian infrastructure, how people with disabilities get from point A to point B in order to take advantage of point B. If you can't get there, then you can't take advantage of it. So we held another major event, invited many different people from the community, and also it was a two-part where we had a speaker. Actually, Melissa Anderson was our speaker, and we talked about pedestrian infrastructure. Then we went out on walks around our city, and we had identified 7 different areas within the city that we wanted for people to go out, take their questionnaires, their walkability tool that one of our members had actually compiled, and do an assessment. And so then we did that for about an hour and a half or so, a couple hours, and we came back for a luncheon and had a discussion about what we all observed. And we had a panel, and again, Melissa Anderson stayed around and was a part of that virtually. And we were able to compile some needs as we observed these 7 different areas. And these were critically identified by certain types of pedestrian infrastructure that we knew were critical to the safe travel of people with disabilities. So that was our event for 2021, again, through an ADA Indiana grant.
Barbara, can I just jump in
Yeah.
and say that as staff support, this was probably easily one of the most complex events I've ever done. It involved obviously preparing all of the pedestrian routes that you had to go out and walk and measure and take photos of and find the exact spots that you wanted to make sure that people got to see, both good and bad. And in addition to making it a hybrid event, that it was also on Zoom and live. When we went out into the field, we actually took iPads and had the ASL interpreters go out with that group, and we filmed them as well as the head of the group actually filming what they were seeing and talking about, so that the people on Zoom could actually experience it as well. And I can't remember ever doing an event quite that complex and challenging. It was really interesting. Yeah. This picture is of the room, which was really large, with all 7 tables, with each group around the table. As you can see, there's a person in a wheelchair there, and we're off to the side trying to run it with a big screen. So just wanted to throw that in there.
I'm glad you did. Thank you. Yeah, and so it was a very successful event. And so we're coming out of that one, and we already have identified, again, we had a little bit of money left over, and we've already identified how we might use that money. So we may be producing a video where we will do interviews regarding the types of pedestrian issues that we've found, and be able to share that with interested parties. So, so we don't want to talk much more at you, but I do want to say this. I know that, you know, I'm speaking as an advocate, but building partnerships are so important. And I wanted to say a few key things to think about when you're wanting to involve volunteers, people with disabilities, whom bring all kinds of things to the table, all kinds of perspectives and all kinds of talents and skills. And so I just made a few notes, and these aren't on slides, but you know, as you establish relationships, sometimes we always expect people to come to us. And I think it's important to realize that if you really want to reach people, sometimes maybe working with their schedules, different chapters of organizations or groups that are made up of people with disabilities, you might try to get to their meetings, maybe in the evenings, on Saturday mornings. It might, if you're allowed to do that in your position. The other thing is just really showing support for their goals and objectives. Another thing is we're often asked, people with disabilities, to provide input or to even evaluate programs or projects. And so I think really making sure that you show appreciation or demonstrate in some way that input is valued. In fact, as we all know, that input is also often required for grants. And so making sure that maybe you recognize that in some way, either in providing transportation to meetings or some kind of perk, whether it's a stipend or gift cards, and especially if you're drawing on people's specific talents to evaluate projects and programs that you are seeking to establish for your agency within the city or the locality. And so I'm going to, lastly, I just wanted to say that, yeah, lastly, just be flexible, because sometimes those opportunities fall in your lap, and it may not be the way you're going, but you might be able to take a turn and take advantage of something that just dropped in your lap. And I think that was demonstrated through the story of the Transportation and Mobility Committee. So we'd like to open it up for your questions. I hope it's been helpful for you, or informative, or sparked some ideas. And so please let us know if you have any questions. Michael?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the one last slide is the collaborations and partnerships slide that we have. These are the groups that we most closely connected with. Bloomington Transit, of course, for your transit company. Help by Design, which is an organization in Indiana that really does a lot for people with disabilities. The Indiana Institute on Disabilities and Community, which we've gotten funding from and have a great relationship with. Regular attendees from there come to our meetings. The Heartland Association of the American Council of the Blind, who is going to be in our event for the ADA anniversary celebration next week, and we are connected with a lot of the people from that. Stonebelt and Life Designs are organizations that work with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have real strong connections with them. Safe Driving with Dementia, the medical world we're connected into. We do a lot with medical transportation companies, and they help do all of our transportation for our big event that we just held. And lots of individual community advocates. And we also work with, Chamber of Commerce and Plan and Traffic and Bike and Pedestrian Commissions and Area Agency on Aging and Centers for Independent Living. We try to make as many connections and collaborations as we can. So
yeah. And I would like to add to that, part of getting people with disabilities involved and keeping them involved is letting them know that they have some choice and control in the situation, and that whatever the program is, whatever the project is, that it's really going to affect their lives where the rubber meets the road. And so, is it going to affect my life, somewhere in the very near future? Are we talking about a 20-year plan? So a little bit, really being able to focus on, very concretely, how is this going to affect your life? So I think that is another important thing to keep in mind. So giving people real ownership and the collaboration is important. So do we have any questions?
I tried to switch to the last slide. It's not going to the last slide for some reason.
All right. Hello. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Barbara.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Todd Webb. We're going to go ahead. We're going to do our last poll question, and then we'll get into, we have several questions here that attendees are asking, and we'll get into that. Let me go ahead. I'm going to launch our last poll question here. And so, launch that. How does your agency use the ADA transition plan? Select all that apply. So we'll give you about a minute here. All right, it looks like project development design is number one, followed by maintenance work. That's really good. And then project scoping. Oh, we have long range planning. Sorry, forgot that. Looks like the second one here. So, all right, we're going to end the poll now. Thank you. All right. Michael and Barbara, great job. Thank you so much. You really showed the full circle of what it takes really to have such a great relationship. What it involves, who it involves, and the many benefits that result from those relationships. Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you for really bringing it home here as the fourth one of the most important parts of this 4-part series, showing that value and that relationship. So we have a couple questions here, and then I'm going to jump into some questions actually from the participants. So the first question I have for you is, how do you reach out to the community?
Can I, before you answer, can I stop the share, or do you want me to leave that up?
Yes, you can leave that up. That's perfectly fine. Yep. That way for individuals that want to continue to write down the information. Okay.
And Barbara, you can take that question first if you want.
Okay. Well, how do you reach out to the community? Now, are you asking from the perspective of a person planning and policy kind of with the localities, I guess?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm talking from
So,
their point of view.
yeah, yeah. And I think I made a few suggestions. I think really making the first step to establish a relationship with the groups that already exist. For example, you might have chapters of the American Council of the Blind, or in your community, or you have other disability groups that exist around town. And I think really reaching out to them and letting them know that what they have to say is important and actually critical to establishing change. And so I think there are many ways to reach those groups. I mean, you can look on websites, et cetera. You can start with agencies that already exist and you know they exist, like area agencies on aging and ARC organizations, even aging, ARP. I can't remember the name of it. I'm thinking of all these acronyms. Anyway, but yeah, so that's how and also you probably already have some advocates in your town. And so really putting your ear to the ground. So Michael might have some more to add on that. Working with your, also your SILT, your Centers for Independent Living is another place to, reach out for advocacy. Okay, go ahead.
One good thing from our community is that there are a lot of boards and commissions that the city governments help structure, and of course the council is just one of those. Bike and planning, pedestrian commission. So a lot of those commissions are connected directly to the community as well, and those people in their roles as commissioners or board members are also out there connecting with the community and asking things and bringing issues to city governments and to each other and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's another key place that it gets done too.
Mm-hmm. I heard a question about, are we limited to how we use the grant monies, and do we have grant writers? And we don't. Other than we in the committee, we write our grants, and Michael assists. Michael in the city is always the fiscal agent. So they help with that, with managing the monies and how it's spent. So he takes a major role in that, actually the primary role.
But it is definitely, the committees definitely has a big input all along the way in terms of the real content and what's going to happen with the grants and what we're going to do. But that's definitely the committee.
Yeah, we definitely have a committee emphasis on when we write a grant. So.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And second question, once you reach out to the community, how do you get them engaged? And you have shown some things in your presentation. I didn't know if there's anything you could add to that to really get the community engaged in what you're trying to do here.
How do we get them engaged?
Yeah.
And I think honestly, to be fair, I had some points here that I actually put these together today and didn't get them on a slide, but ensuring people's engagement is, and I think that was part of the question, was making sure that they understand that their input is valued. In fact, in order for you as a city planner or agency planner, you need that input in order to construct whatever the program is or project. As we know, most federal grants require some stakeholder input. And so making sure that they understand, the people with disabilities who are providing you the input, that they understand that their information is critical to the success. Without them, you don't have it. And I think, showing that value, whether you could reach out by coming to their meetings, or provide transportation to a meeting, or provide some kind of gift cards, or I've seen a lot of that done recently in different projects, providing gift cards. So finding ways to make sure that they know that they are valued and that their input, their choice, they have control. And so I think that is very important. It's important for any volunteer to keep them involved.
And I'd say that from my perspective as a staff member, it is about trying to make extra special efforts to involve people. So, I mean, if I'm going to name something, I never name it myself. I send out an email to 10 people and say, give me your input. I try to involve everybody at every level. And I work very closely with as many different kinds of special disability groups. I try to connect in with them. We try to do extra special little touches too. So for example, there's a company in town that does great little charcuterie boards. And when we had an event, we had the charcuterie boards to be picked up in this last year with the pandemic. We obviously allowed them to come in and pick it up. But if you had any issue because you had a disability, we had somebody go out and deliver it to your home. And so now we're on to our this next event where we're going to be talking about this book. You can pick it up at City Hall if you want, if it's easy, and if not, we'll happily deliver it to your door. And so that's the kind of thing that I think really helps get people engaged. We have newsletter. I work really hard to keep our social media page up and active. All those ways are different things that we do to engage the community.
We have hundreds of people on our email list, literally hundreds and hundreds of entities, individuals. And then, of course, we have a Facebook page that is very active.
All right. Thank you, Michael and Barbara. Very helpful information. So here's some questions from the participants. What tools do you use for the surveys?
Good question. I would say it's sort of fluid. We use most frequently a hard copy of the actual survey that we've set up, which the committee ages ago worked on and organized. And, we have paper cheat sheets and all that kind of stuff. And you go out with a clipboard. We put it online 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I guess, and so you can do it from an iPad and be able to do that. It goes into a spreadsheet, essentially a glorified spreadsheet called Smartsheet, and then I massage it and spit it back out into a format that people can read. We are in the middle of evaluating another company and looking into them as a possibility of using a different kind of survey software that would be light years ahead of where we're at. I mean, you would take a picture and answer a question, and it actually puts in all of the information about exactly whether or not it not only passes or doesn't pass, but what the rule is and how to state it and the whole bit. And that whole thing can be generated into an awesome report that can go back to the end of business in question. So we're in the middle of hopefully switching over. Costs a little bit more, of course, so we're not trying to figure out the finance for it, but we'll hopefully be able to do that. So, but that's what we use now is a thing called Smartsheet.
And are we talking about jot forms and Survey Monkey? I mean, are we talking about? Is that what we're talking about? Surveys, as in.
I thought they were talking about the accessibility surveys, because we do a lot of surveys of our folks through just using jot forms.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry I didn't clarify that in the beginning. It surveys, for the businesses.
Okay, that's good.
And then another person had asked, what was the company, that you utilize for those surveys,
Yeah.
Okay.
And is it a checklist? How detailed? And do you keep the data or let the businesses know where they need to improve?
I'm happy to. I think that if I click on the chat, it's going to throw me out of the thing anyway. So I'll try and see what happens. But I will put in a URL in the chat that is that has the actual survey, both the downloadable PDF and the online version, which you could do. Not much point in doing it, but you can do that. So I'm going to stop my share just so that I can grab that URL, because I think that will be really helpful for a lot of people. So
Yeah. And I think, yeah, and I will say that we do, as the accessibility community does, a committee does communicate with the business about what needs to be corrected. And I think that was part of the question. And as far as the digital, we haven't really established, we're just beginning now to, we haven't, I don't think Michael can correct me, but we don't have a complete tool on how we're going to evaluate whether somebody is their website is accessible. Not yet, but we are working on it.
yeah, that
So
should be out the next month or two, and then we will be doing full-blown surveys. We're just kind of doing more testing of it right now.
Mhm.
But yeah, I put that in the URL and the link in the website for the decal screening, and it has the checklist, the checklist specs, and even the list of all the people that we've done it. It has an easy to read version with logos and stuff like that of all the organizations that do have it too, as well as guidelines for preparing menus in large print, and door poundage guidelines, and accessible parking checklists and things like that.
Yeah, but again, we hope to add websites soon, because that's a critical part of a business.
Thank you. Absolutely, it is, especially during COVID, as more and more individuals utilize, the internet to access information.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Mhm.
So what training, do you provide volunteers, volunteer surveyors, and particularly training on physical facilities? Do you provide them training?
Yeah, so we had a person who used a wheelchair do most of the training. He finally got to the point he was like, I can't keep up with this. And so I do it. I usually take somebody out for about an hour or two to one or two spots, depending on what kind of features. Like, you gotta have it has to have a parking lot, so we can make sure we get that in. It has to have restrooms, so we go to various places, and I spend a couple hours and we go over it. And then we encourage strongly for our interpreters to hook up with another fellow surveyor, especially the newer ones, so that they can do surveys together. When we did the polling sites and schools, it was absolutely mandatory for them to have a partner, so that we had two people to ensure that everything got done just right. So yeah, that's how we train them.
And we do, yeah, and there are many volunteers, there are students that we use, and they're trained in what to do. The other thing I want to say too is that the Transportation and Mobility Committee was very involved with the transit company and surveying bus stops. And so we had people who are blind with different degrees of vision loss, people who use canes, people who use wheelchairs, and who went out and helped with some of those bus stop assessments.
And then we got a grant that's paying for 50 of them to be improved. And I think they're halfway through the improvement, and they're just another few weeks before they'll finish all of them. So that was really kind of cool to have them do that and be involved with it and say, here are the problems, and now they're fixing those things. So that's really been great.
And I want to point out too that what partnerships can lead to, and I will take a little bit of pride in this, and we started talking about combination, of transit and Uber-like services, smartphone services, transportation services, working together to expand the transportation options for people with disabilities, or for people in general, honestly. And so we've been talking about this for a few years, and our transit company is now piloting a project, and they're keeping us informed, and we're working with them as they pilot a project to use ride-hailing services, Uber and Lyft, to facilitate a bus route that is not getting a lot of service. So they are going to take the fixed route out of service, and they're going to pilot using ride-hailing in that route area. So that would be something that we're longing to see more and more of.
Hey, and can I also throw in that the more that we do, the more we get asked to do, which is kind of, in my mind, is kind of cool. So people are now regularly coming and saying, we would like to talk to the Council for Community Accessibility and get their feedback and input on what we should do under these circumstances. 2 days ago, our city council came to us and said, hey, we have an issue of not having used ASL interpreters versus live transcript or CART. What do you think? How do we do this? We've had engineers come to us and say, we'd like to co-develop a course with you and the council to help train our engineers to be more understand the perceptions of people with disabilities as they do design. We'd like to help that. We closed down a major thoroughfare through the city for businesses to be able to put out tables and chairs and have meals outside. Because of that, we lost some accessibility spaces. The economic and sustainable people came to us and said, hey, we've lost some accessibility spaces. We'd like to talk to you and get your input on how to ensure that we have more spaces. And we in the middle of doing a survey and saying, oh, we are lacking in the quantity of spaces. We need to add more spaces. And so, we're going to be working on that. So we're getting a lot more of the different city departments and people from the outside as well saying, what else can we, how else can we connect with you and what can we do to make sure that we're being more accessible? So that's.
I think that it's one thing about this, and one way to look at this. It's better to be proactive and looking at the accessibility of whatever program you are seeking to establish. So to go to the entities that program is going to affect, and of course it's going to affect the whole community likely, but the community with people with disabilities. If you've got a community council for accessibility established, you'd be very smart to connect with that council to be proactive before you develop something, and then you find out, oh, retroactively this doesn't work. Now we got to go back and fix it, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. So it is very proactive for these people to come and talk to the people that know, and they know firsthand.
Thank you. So do the businesses receive a report of accessibility findings, and have businesses fixed barriers for accessibility?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. They receive it if they are accessible, and they receive it if they're not. If they receive it and they are, we go and give them the decal, ask them to put it on the door, tell them we're going to put them on the city's website, and we do. If they're not, we send them a letter saying that this is the barriers that you need to fix, and we hope that you do fix them. Let us know. We'll be happy to come back and look at the survey. If you have questions, let us know. I'll be honest, it is not as good a response as I sure wish it would be in terms of people fixing their barriers. That's why we work so hard at trying to do those other events and make people more aware of them. So we're working on it, though.
Yeah. Absolutely, and for the Transportation and Mobility Committee, our next steps will be really focusing on pedestrian and how that environment really looks as far as consistency in design, predictability in design. As you're traveling from one block to another, you're going to see all kinds of curb designs. Literally, one curb design doesn't look like another one, and so we're going to be communicating about that and working with our designers. And part of what Michael is doing with the staff now and the transportation engineer is to develop something similar to communicating that kind of information.
All right, thank you. Another question here. Are you limited to how the grant money can be used?
Yes.
And it depends on the grant. Yeah, it depends on the grant. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I submit a budget with what I think that we're going to be spending our money on. Of course, it never matches up entirely perfectly, and most of the granting agencies are understanding of that. But sometimes, you plan on certain things and they're going to cost so much, like, well, for example, ASL interpretation, and we will be planning on this is how much it's going to cost. and suddenly an ASL interpreter gets sick, and so they end up getting one in town, and they don't have the travel expenses, and so it costs less. What are we going to do to fill in the money that we didn't get to spend for that? And we come up with ideas every time to figure out how to spend it. We're pretty good.
We're very creative people.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, are there grant opportunities from your state for like downtown development districts that specifically focus on businesses removing barriers? Are there opportunities like that?
There are federal grants. There are federal opportunities for that.
Well, there's.
There you.
Yeah, that's a harder question to answer. I mean, there are not as much working with businesses as working with, grinding down concrete, or get a grant for that and doing that in front of businesses, but not as much directly with businesses. That's probably something that we could do better and do more of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think there are federal grants for working with pedestrian, changes in pedestrian infrastructure.
Another question here. So, can anybody join the group? Do they have to be residents of Bloomington, residents of Indiana, or can they be from other places throughout the country?
Well, the council is definitely for the city of Bloomington residents. We have people who are definitely outside of our county involved because they come to Bloomington regularly and they want to see it more accessible. Occasionally people from other parts of the state will join in if there's something that's relevant. We try to get regular speakers to come to our committee meetings or our meetings of the full council. And sometimes that will draw in people from other places. And if it's on Zoom, you can live anywhere. So we're happy to have people involved from all over, especially if they can contribute too.
For example, in the Transportation and Mobility Committee, we have someone who represents Health by Design, and Health by Design is based out of Indianapolis, and we're in Bloomington. And we have had other members who have come, and they really want to keep up with what we're doing, and they also participate in what we're doing. But of course, our focus is to affect the the infrastructure and accessibility and in Bloomington. And so.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
What are your most common barriers found in your survey?
Oh, definitely parking and bathroom issues by far. Bathrooms frequently are not fully accessible. They have, obviously all the standard issues, paper towels are too high, the toilet paper is too far away from the stool, there's not the right kind of handles, there'll just be knobs on the faucets, all that kind of stuff. So bathrooms are probably leader. Parking close second. A lot of that has to do with not having the appropriate signage, of course, and definitely striping of parking lots is seems to be an art, and people seem to be very creative in it and not try to follow the standards. So that's always a challenge. Not having enough spaces. Those are some of the main kind of issues. But you run the whole gamut. There are going to be all sorts of different issues that you run into.
And I know you're probably talking about the physical accessibility of buildings, but if I could address just very quickly some of the accessibility issues that we have found in our walkability surveys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, would be, inconsistency of curb cut designs or curb cuts that aren't there. I mean, curbs without curb cuts. We also have, a lot of encroachment on sidewalks, or as far as, foliage, trees, etc. Broken up sidewalks, sidewalks that begin and end without any real destination. So those are some of the things that we face as, people who have mobility issues and are seeking to get from point A to point B. But we are affecting the environment. We are affecting the change, and that's what's important.
I'd add too, it's like we definitely run into some of those kinds of issues when we do our survey of the facilities, but most businesses are pretty careful to make their path of travel pretty easy to get into, because that's a pretty negative just for anybody. I mean, just a mother in a stroller has the same kind of issues, right?
Right.
As everybody else.
Exactly.
So those kind of issues are there, but you see those more in neighborhoods and other areas around the city where there's more, I don't want to say crumbling infrastructure, but definitely sidewalks that can use in improving. So that's where we see more of that kind of issue.
And I do want to point out that we have something called You Report that is really cool. And I'll let Michael talk a little bit about that. But that's really a great way to report pedestrian issues when you come across them in the community. And talk briefly, Michael, about You Report.
Yeah, so any kind of issue that gets put into your report gets directed to somebody in the city government that can address the issue. If you put the word accessibility into the report, it's going to come to me first automatically. A lot of it's just simple issues of people saying, the sidewalk's not accessible because my neighbor won't cut off their foliage that's hanging over. And I will just turn that over to somebody who's going to go, tell the neighbor you need to cut your foliage down. But a lot of the issues are, a fire hydrant sticking out too far and somebody who is blind is tripped over it. Can you deal with this? And of course, then I, involve the right people, utilities people, to get the fire hydrant, restructured. So I do a lot of that out in the community in terms of people having complaints and issues as well. And You Report is a great way to be able to do that. And I'm always telling people, please just stick it in there so it's documented. I'll get on it just as fast either way, but if it's documented, it shows up and adds to our statistics and makes it easier.
And You Report is it works with GPS. So if you take a picture of it with your smartphone wherever you are and then put it into You Report, it will document.
Yeah.
So
great, thank you. The accessibility parking, does the city require a permit for when businesses are restriping, and then some type of follow-up self reporting where they would show measurements or a follow-up with an inspector going out there to ensure that what has been restriped follows the accessibility standards?
Funny you should mention that. Last week, when the person at your webinar mentioned that their city was, I thought they were doing it, but when I wrote to her, she said, well, we're not actually doing it. We're hoping to get city council approval. Because I was like, send me that information because I want to start that program right away. And today I happened to be talking to the deputy mayor and told him about it. And he's like, ooh, that sounds like an interesting idea. Most of the people that I've talked to in the last week about that exact program, of course, have this knee-jerk reaction. More bureaucracy and more fees and more issues. But there are several say, yeah, but it's probably needed. So my hope is, if you're doing this in a year and I came back, that I'd be saying, and we started this great restriping permit program. We'll see.
And one thing that I would like to say before we lose everyone, if you're looking for an activity to do at a fair or at some kind of city, farmers market or whatever, and you're wanting to raise, awareness about transportation and mobility, we've actually done a really cool activity. And I'll let Michael kind of visually describe it, but we place a large brown paper over a table and we put different words on the paper that pertain to transportation and mobility. For example, what does the word mobility mean to you? And what does the word access mean to you? And we do these things in the context of transportation and mobility. And then we put thought balloons and we gather people's. And so it gives people an opportunity to look at this and think, what does that mean? And so anyway, Michael, can you elaborate on that?
We ask them to draw or write whatever might be important to them. it's a fun thing just to get it. And I save these up from our various events and, spread them out on occasion, takes photos of them, post them on Facebook and things like that. So fun activity.
I heard a question on first mile, last mile. I heard that come over the voice over.
Okay, yes. Is there any tie-ins as coordination to Bloomington's access to transit? So that first and last mile, et cetera, efforts that,
Yeah, transit has talked about that. And I think it's something that they've looked at, and we've actually talked about that a little bit we have some major companies that are employers outside of the city limits. And so, getting those people to their jobs and then getting them back into the city. We've had communications about that. I don't know that they're doing it yet, but there definitely is conversation.
all right, thank you. Do you have a policy on who maintains the sidewalks in your city? And do you make property owners aware?
Unfortunately, this of course is my opinion, but unfortunately, sidewalks are pretty much the responsibility of the property owner out in front of their property. But it does vary. There are grants. I complained about mine. My walk to City Hall is 10 blocks, and it went down numerous issues and challenges on that sidewalk. Probably complained about it more than once. I'm not sure it was definitely just me or anything, but we got a big grant came in and they fixed the entire sidewalks on both sides of the street, almost 10 blocks worth. But most of the time it is the property owners and they're made aware of issues and challenges, but it's hard to keep out in front of those. And so it's a lot of people who, squeaky wheel. So sometimes they'll fix different segments of sidewalk when they get grants or other forms of things. And the downtown area has been pretty well covered. So,
and I want to also answer to that squeaky wheel comment. And that is so critically important. And remember to keep that in mind. If there are any advocates on this call, it is the squeaky wheel that will get the grease. It's the squeaky wheel that's going to get the money. And your bicycling, your cycling community is a very strong advocacy community. And sometimes our issues, coordinate with each other, but often they don't. And so it's very important that the disability community become involved. It's not going to happen just because you wish it. And so be just as loud as the cycling community because they will get the attention. So.
And I would close, Todd, too, with if there are questions that didn't get answered today, you can, I probably can't answer all of them at once just because I'm pretty darn busy, but feel free to send me an email on them and I'm happy to try to answer any questions that I can.
Yeah.
All right.
And
absolutely.
me as well. So please.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we have 3 minutes. I was just curious, the sidewalks that you mentioned, the adjacent property owners are responsible. Are the sidewalks in the public right of way?
Yeah, essentially they're still city property, and yet the property owners have to maintain them. I find that not smart. It's like, well, wait a minute, you'll clear the streets and you own those, but you won't clear the sidewalks. I don't quite get that.
Yeah. It is very, and I don't know that there is a really clear sidewalk policy, honestly, with the city. And again, that's my opinion, but I don't know that it's a real clear policy. So.
All right, thank you. Well, let's see here. We've got how many accessible curb ramps are constructed yearly in your community?
Wow.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up. You'll have to send me that question for me to answer that.
Yeah, but can I make a comment, please, Todd? There,
yes, absolutely.
Because I just recently got a new guide dog, and so I've been kind of traveling all over the city. But I would hope that, and I would like to point out for your planners, your policymakers on this call, to really, really communicate with your disability community. Some curb design works and some doesn't. And when you have so many different types of designs, and you're trying to utilize all those curb cuts, and predictability is important. And you know, some of our curb cuts are ramps. Some of them are in the corner, like at the round of the curb. Some of them are truncated domes, and they're flat. The curb ramps are literally flat to the street, so you don't know where the street begins and the sidewalk begins. So you have truncated domes. And there's all kinds of designs. So I think really that's so critical to the safe travel of people with disabilities. Also, the APS. You cannot underestimate the importance of the audible pedestrian signals and really communicating on what design works best for people with disabilities, for people who are blind and vision impaired in particular.
All right. Well, thank you, Barbara, for making that point about APS, and thank you, Michael, for all your insight and everything. You guys have been fantastic. We greatly appreciate you both, and thank you. We're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap this up. Like we said, you can reach out to the presenters. We've provided their information if you have additional questions, if you want copies of their slides. So this has been a great discussion. Thank you all for participating. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted in the future. Special thanks to our speakers, Michael Shermis and Barbara Salisbury, and to our partners at AASHTO, Rene Rico, and the civil rights community. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day.